The numbers were my sanctuary. Amidst the fluorescent glow of my office, I found peace in their order, their predictability, until the day I found the discrepancy. It was small at first, a rounding error perhaps. But in my 15 years as a senior accountant at Hyperion Financial, I developed an instinct. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. Just a timing issue, Ellis had said with that dismissive wave of his when I'd brought it to his attention. Ellis Grant, CFO, with his custom Italian suits and that Rolex he never stopped fiddling with. We'll adjust it next quarter. But the next quarter brought more discrepancies. A pattern emerged. Phantom revenue, manipulated earnings, creative accounting that crossed every ethical line I knew. The further I dug, the worse it became. $87 million in fraudulent transactions, laundered through subsidiary shell companies and recorded as legitimate business. When I compiled my findings and walked into Ellis's office that Friday afternoon in October, I expected concern, perhaps even gratitude. Instead, I got escorted out by security. Restructuring, the HR director called it, avoiding my eyes as she handed me my severance package. Company-wide changes. I was the only one let go that day. Rain hammered against the windows of my apartment as I stared at the ceiling that night, unable to sleep. My phone buzzed with the text from Sarah, my former colleague in accounts receivable. "Everyone knows it's bullshit, James. Ellis told the team you were making unfounded accusations because you were passed over for promotion. They're afraid." My stomach clenched. Not just fired, but discredited. Blacklisted, essentially, in our relatively small financial community. My reputation, my only real asset, deliberately destroyed. Sarah's next text arrived. "He's having us reclassify your documentation. It's being buried." I sat up, a cold clarity washing over me. The severance agreement they'd had me sign included a non-disclosure clause. They thought they'd silenced me, that I'd go away quietly, another middle-aged accountant with a mortgage and no job prospects, too frightened to speak up. They'd miscalculated. My plan required patience. I'd spent 15 years building a reputation for meticulous attention to detail. I would bring that same precision to my revenge. First step, secure the evidence. I hadn't been stupid enough to leave all my documentation at the office. I'd made copies, encrypted backups. But it wasn't enough to prove the fraud. I needed to understand the full architecture of their scheme. For 3 weeks, I became a ghost. I drove to the office parking garage at 5:30 each morning, positioning myself near the entrance. Sarah would arrive at 6:15, take my burner phone, and return it at lunch with screenshots, document scans, and meeting notes. "They're accelerating," she whispered during our last exchange. "Year-end bonuses depend on hitting these targets. Ellis has the board convinced they'll exceed projections." The stock price had risen 18% since my departure. Investors were ecstatic. The CEO had been featured in Business Weekly, hailing their revolutionary approach to capital allocation. It was all built on sand. The second phase began with a Gmail account and a VPN. From there, I created Jacob Reynolds, financial analyst at a fictional boutique investment firm. Jacob began posting thoughtful, intelligent analyses of various companies on investor forums and financial message boards. He built credibility methodically, gaining followers, respect. Meanwhile, I mapped the fraud completely. Their system was elegant, but fundamentally flawed. They'd created a circular flow of transactions between subsidiaries that manufactured revenue while concealing liabilities. Quarter-end manipulations artificially inflated cash positions. Classic accounting fraud, but at a scale that made Enron look amateurish. 3 days before Hyperion's annual investor call, Jacob Reynolds published his first analysis of the company. It was complimentary, noted some unusual patterns worth monitoring. The stock dipped slightly, then recovered. The next day, Reynolds published a deeper dive, raising specific questions about subsidiary transactions and revenue recognition patterns. The stock dropped 4%. Ellis appeared on CNBC that afternoon, dismissing the analysis as uninformed speculation from an unknown source. He projected confidence, but I noticed his tell, that nervous adjustment of his Rolex. He was scared. The morning of the investor call, I launched the final phase. Jacob Reynolds published a comprehensive, devastating analysis of Hyperion's finances, complete with transaction records, internal documents, and a forensic accounting breakdown that proved systematic fraud. I'd spent weeks crafting the report to be irrefutable. I submitted it simultaneously to the SEC, the Wall Street Journal, and every major investor in Hyperion. The stock halted trading after dropping 37% in 20 minutes. My burner phone buzzed with Sarah's text. Total chaos here. SEC just arrived. Ellis is locked in the conference room with legal. I watched the investor call stream live on my laptop. The CEO appeared, ashen-faced, announcing a postponement pending review of certain allegations. Behind him, through the glass conference room wall, I could see dark-suited federal agents. 2 days later, I sat across from federal prosecutors, and documentation spread across the table. You understand that, as a whistleblower, you're entitled to a percentage of any recovered funds, the lead prosecutor said. I nodded. The money wasn't irrelevant. I had a mortgage after all. But it wasn't why I'd done this. That evening, I watched Ellis being escorted from the building in handcuffs, his face splashed across every financial news network. The stock had lost 68% of its value. Class action lawsuits were being filed hourly. The company would likely not survive. My phone rang, a headhunter I'd worked with years earlier. James, I've got 3 firms asking for you specifically. They're calling you a hero in the industry. How soon can you start? I looked at my computer screen, where Ellis's face was frozen in a mask of shocked disbelief, and allowed myself a small smile. I need to review their balance sheets first, I said. In accounting, as in life, everything eventually balances out.